Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Hi, and welcome to Straight Talk About God video. I'm Jack. The War of Two World Churches. Jax174. So the key to understanding Revelation symbolism is in the seven heads of Revelation 13:1. We talked about that in Jax173. And it's the key that exposes all the false interpretations that the Antichrist, the Antichrist, is exposed, is killed by a fatal head wound, and then comes back to life. Right? And the same is true for chapters 17 and 18. And that's what we're going to get into in detail here. The two churches of God and Satan. Okay? The incorrect interpretation of chapters 17 and 18 is that the seven heads are the seven heads of Rome, or seven world leaders, one or two other things. Also, the seven mountains are the seven hills of Rome. Okay. Well, this is a very easy place for researchers to go. Okay? The Vatican has been the target for hundreds of years. Right? The Pope is said to be the false prophet, the second beast that comes out of the sea in chapter 13. Yeah? So when a researcher sees in Revelation 17:9, where it says that the seven heads are seven mountains, Rome's seven hills, and that's all capitalized, RSH, Rome's seven hills, pops right up, right? And saying that those seven mountains are symbolic, well, yeah, they're symbolic, also produces a conclusion that those seven heads are seven popes, possibly. Some kind of world leaders, yeah. There are also many teachers that say that the great city in 17 and 18 is the United States. The great city is the United States. Great city Babylon. But seeing that those seven heads are really the seven world empires, as we detailed out in 173, makes the fit very nicely, right? There's no speculation or guessing or conjecture as to who they are, right? It makes everything fit very nicely. We're going to get into all that in a lot of detail. But these two chapters outline the whore, the beast, and that great city Babylon. And they give the details of the description of what we laid out in Jax173. Okay? So in order to understand this chapter, we have to go back to the beginning of the establishment of the two world churches. When might that be? The very beginning is the very first prophecy made by God, given to Satan in the Garden of Eden. Genesis 3:15. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, semicolon. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Changes from it to his. So there's some man in the future is going to bruise Satan's head. Right? And just for clarification, let me tell you that Satan's seed is not the result of Satan having sex with Eve. I've heard that over the years. You're making it up, right? Those seed are the mating of the Nephilim. Those are the fallen angels, Nephilim, and human women of Genesis 6. Okay? And based on that word of God, Satan proceeded to try and corrupt Adam's bloodline in order to sidetrack whatever seed might come in the future. Okay? And he was at that until Christ showed up. He thought he'd won because he got Christ to be sent to the cross. Yeah, victory, victory. Yeah, but we know that resurrection defeated Satan, don't we? And from then on, he had to change lanes, right? And he went on to corrupt as much of the human genome, all of it, as he could, not just Adam's bloodline, okay? In order to prevent the bloodline, to prevent the people from being acceptable by God. Okay, as history progressed, the new development came to pass. Satan would adapt his plans to include those developments. But starting at that scene in the garden, both God and Satan began building a, quote, church, by giving people the belief system that would result in the worship of the head of each of those belief systems, either God or Satan. Okay? 2 churches. But the fallen angels didn't stop their corrupting ways with human beings. Okay? They went on to corrupt all flesh. All flesh. Genesis 6:12 and 13. And God looked upon the earth, this is before the flood, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted his way on the earth. 13. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh, I wrote that in bold type, is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them in the earth. Right. Well, just so we wouldn't misunderstand, God repeated himself in detail about what he meant by all flesh. Okay? Verse 17, chapter 6. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh. Here it is, bold type. Wherein is the breath of life. Destroy all flesh that is the breath of life. From under the heaven and under that which is in the earth, all shall die. Okay. Everything that can breathe. That's more than people, right? How animals, birds, everything that can breathe. Okay? They're supposed to die. So, see, those angels were also bioengineering animal life. Animal life. Yeah. See? You may want to consider the mythical chimera hybrids, like a centaur. Horse with a man? Okay. The only flesh that would be alive would be those on the ark. Okay. And God even made the animals come to Noah and show whether or not they had been corrupted or not. See? All the animals hadn't been corrupted, but, okay, what happened was they would come before Noah and either crouch down in obeisance or not. And if they didn't crouch down, they were shunted aside and left for later. Here's what God did. It started to rain, right? And they said, uh-oh, it's raining, a flood. Noah, open the door. He didn't open the door, okay? But there were a lot of people trying to get into the ark, right? And maybe they could have forced their way into the ark, or forced their way, put up some ladders up and climbed on top of the ark, or whatever, see? But this is what God used for those animals that were shunted aside. Those elephants and tigers and monkeys and whatever else. They chased all those people away. Good God, right? Anyway, just for additional confirmation, because this isn't the only story about what happened here, okay? Additional confirmation, we'll go to the book of Jasher in chapter 4 and verse 18. It's the same story. But look, don't be confused by the fact that it says sons of men, because what follows the sons of men can't do. Okay? Firstly, it starts out by identifying them as judges and rulers. Well, what about a 15-foot giant? Wouldn't they be ruling things? Huh? Wouldn't they be the top dog? Huh? And sometimes even eating human beings if they had to? Okay. See, but those judges and humans, those judges and rulers can't be humans, because they must have had some very advanced technology that we don't have even today. They're working on it, but we can't do it, you know. You see, after listing all the animal life, it says, and they taught. They taught the mixture of animals of one species with another. Why? In order to therewith provoke the Lord. Okay. Well, that can't mean the way we mix animals today, right? The word species tells the tale. God created animals that can interbreed. Different breeds of dog can interbreed and make a new breed of dog, right? Okay. Elephants can't breed with zebras, right? Dogs can't breed with cats. Horses can't breed with humans, you know, like that centaur, right? God created animals that could interbreed and those that can't, okay? And the book of Enoch is a third version, okay? It accounts, Enoch writes that that those angels that went into women and produced those hybrids came to God, to Enoch, and said, please go to God and plead our case, and maybe he'll forgive us. And he comes back from God, and he says, no. He said no. Okay? Now, just because those angels had sex with women and even produced viable offspring, okay, they weren't created in order to add to the angel population, right? Angels were not created in order to procreate. You know, they were created to be husbandmen. God created a whole universe and then created the angels to take care of it. They were stewards of the universe, right? The fact that they did procreate with women tells us exactly whose side they were on. As Jasher says, to provoke the Lord. They were on assignment from Satan, the head angel, to contribute to his work of corrupting the human genome and everything else, right? So that meant that God's church made it through the flood, and Satan's church didn't. Victory for God. But angels don't die. Angels don't die. Spirits don't die. So after the flood, Satan started over. And he started over with Nimrod. Nimrod, he was the great-grandson of Noah. And he did this in a way that we're not aware of. But he got Nimrod to allow his DNA to be tampered with, and he became what the Bible says he became, which was not human. Okay? The Bible says in Genesis 10:8, and Cush, his father, Cush begat Nimrod, : he began to be a mighty one, bold type, mighty one in the earth. Okay, mighty one in the earth. Samson was a mighty one in the earth, but he was human. The humanity was mixed around with the DNA change, and Nimrod became a Gabor, because mighty one in Hebrew, translated mighty one, is Gabor. And that's the word that's always used later on to mean giants, translated giants. There's another thing that's translated, it's Rephaim. Rephaim. So it might not say giants, but if it says Rephaim, it's one of those hybrid angel-human chimeras, okay? And so Goliath and his 4 brothers with 6 fingers and 6 toes. Goliath was 10 feet tall. You know, he wasn't a human giant with megalomania or whatever that is, okay? He was a mixture, right? And so he was a Rephaim. So if it says Rephaim, it means giant, okay? Okay, now we're going to take a good look at this, okay? Remember how the Israelites wouldn't go into the promised land because there were giants there? There were Gibor there, huh? Those were the fallen angels because they were at it again, right, after the flood. Because before the flood, God told us in chapter 6, he told us what would happen after the flood. See? Genesis 6:4 says, there were giants in the earth. I'm going to send a flood. There were giants in the earth in that day, in those days, and, bold type, also after that. Also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. Well, that doesn't sound like bad stuff, does it? Except that the daughters of men got impregnated by angels, okay? But you see, I put this up there with all the Strong's numbers in there so that you could see the difference, because there's 2 things to notice in this verse, okay? First of all, you can see that there are words that are italicized, right? And if you've got a King James, and a lot of other Bibles too, words that are italicized in there. Why are they italicized? Because they mean something more important? Like bold type? No. They mean that they were added by the translators. Oh. So you see that word children, right? It's italicized. It was added by the translators. It's not in the original language. The original language does not say they bore children. They bore humans. They bore men. None of that. It says what they bore became, right? And if you notice, the word became is also italicized. Now, logic tells me that this 15-foot giant, after it became a giant, was born from this woman. No woman in history ever has borne a 40-pound child, right? Women are little people like we are, right? 10, 12-pound kid, whoa, that's heavy, you know? How does that become a 15-foot giant or a 10-foot giant even, right? An elephant doesn't produce a 2 or 3 pound baby, right? They're hundreds of pounds because the elephant's big, okay? So I can take that became italicized and stretch that out to mean that they were born looking like people, men, little baby boys, but they grew into Gabor, giants. Okay. 2 things. Now, the thing that backs that up is that if you notice the word giants at the first part is Hebrew 5303 in Strong's. But it doesn't say giants as the definition. The definition says they were bullies and tyrants. The word means bully or tyrant. Any human being can be a bully or a tyrant, but these were bully and tyrants, but they weren't people, because the H1368 that's behind mighty ones, which are those giants that they talked about, mighty ones, is the word Gabor. And that's that hybrid, right? They're the hybrid angel-human chimera, Satan's seed. Satan's seed. Okay, back to Satan's church. Okay. Nimrod and his wife Semiramis fashioned the pagan mystery religion. Established it well. All right. Satan's fallen angels would be in charge of carrying out that religion throughout history with each world governing body. As we talked about, the seven heads are the world empires with a fallen angel heading up the spiritual system behind that empire. And the life of Nimrod would be the same as the gods listed in all of those initial empires. Okay, when the head god, the sun god of Egypt, Osiris, was there, he did all the same stuff as Nimrod did, but now his name is Osiris. Other places he's Zeus. You know, the head god, the sun god, the head god is always what happened to Nimrod. Okay? And the same thing happened with his wife Semiramis. Okay? Semiramis became Ishtar in the Middle East religions, and over in Egypt she was Isis, right? And then Venus and so forth. Okay? She had a kid after Nimrod died. Now he lived, according to Jasher, he lived 215 years. So he and Semiramis had a lot of time to form and take all the bugs out of the pagan mystery religion. Okay, but again, she got pregnant after Nimrod died. So what happened? Well, Nimrod became the sun god. He ascended into the sun, and he was the sun god. And she was out on the back deck one day, sunning herself, and she got impregnated by a sunbeam. Actually, she was accounted for as the virgin birth. Sound familiar? And she got Tammuz out there. Oh, Tammuz became when he got to Egypt, right? And all of the other sun gods' children that were born on December 25th, those sons are the sons of Tammuz, same as Tammuz, right? It was like musical empires, right? Musical empires. Well, what happened to God's church? Oh, Nimrod, he could be called the pastor of Satan's church, right? He's the head guy, was the head guy, and then Semiramis, right? What about God's church? You know, well, God was building up his church, right? Because he sent Abram to live with Noah and Shem. Another really good story in the book of Jasher. Nimrod was told that a special son was born to Terah. Terah worked for Nimrod in his court. Special son of Terah, and he was going to be a great man, and kings and rulers, and Nimrod said, He called in Terah and he said, bring me your kid, and I'll give you a bunch of horses and whatever stuff and pay for him, because I'm going to kill him. He's not going to take my place. Well, Terah said, well, I don't want to do that. So he hid Abram in a cave for 10 years, right? And at the 10-year point, he sent him to live with Noah and Shem. Abram lived with Noah and Shem for almost 40 years. He didn't come back home till he was 50. And you know he wasn't out on the back deck playing pinochle with them all that time. His main job, that's why he was sent there, was learn about God. Learn that God can be trusted with whatever he says. He became a true believer of God like Shem and Noah. Okay? And when he got back home, He spent about a year there before God called him back out of Ur and sent him away to go to the Holy Land. But while he was there, he pastored God's church. He talked to a whole bunch of people that he knew, and they were converted into Christianity. It wasn't Christianity yet, it was God believing, right? And when he left, when God said, go and I'll tell you when to stop, they all went with him. They were his church. And they all settled down over in Haran, and they lived for 25 years before Abram actually went down into the Holy Land, right? So, he was God's pastor of the first church. Pretty good, huh? Like that? Now, talk about today, because God's church, those descendants of Abram, God promised that he'd have a multitude of descendants. They were going to perpetuate God's belief system and bring it to the rest of the world. And they're doing that right this minute. Today, right this minute. Because that church is now Christianity, and Christianity has been headed up, and still is headed up, by the lost tribes of the house of Israel. Even though most of them don't know that they're that. Right? House of Israel. Christian belief system. Right? And who do you suppose heads up Satan's mystery religion? I mean, who took Nimrod's place, or whatever he was called, when Rome was in there? Saturn or Zeus, or who did that? Who took Venus' place? You know, and who took the place of Tammuz, right, in the pagan mystery religion? Well, those three people, Nimrod, the sun god, became the real God, in quotes. In quotes. Semiramis, the queen of heaven, Ishtar, Isis, Venus, became Mary, the mother of the Messiah, Tammuz, Horus, Jesus. All three in quotes: God, Mary, and Jesus. Right? And because they were all the same God, then all the other pagan worshipers could come to church and worship God and Mary and Jesus, and they'd be just fine. Oh, see? The church at Rome became infiltrated with pagan symbols and rituals and celibacy. That's not in the Bible. You can't find celibacy in the Bible, except where Paul says that, well, when he talks about marriage and stuff, right? But he doesn't say that God commanded you to be celibate, right? How about the College of Cardinals? The original church had no College of Cardinals, with all their red garb and everything. That comes out of the pagan mystery religion, right? Okay. So, that church that Satan built has been throughout the last 5,000 years, since 3000 BC, the worshipers at the bottom, they have very little idea, if any at all, of what goes on up at the top. You can't tell some worshiper of Zeus that he's really worshiping the devil, because he won't believe you, right? Well, by Paul's time, God saw that he had to protect the believers in the first true believer church at Rome, because Claudius the emperor had made a decree that all Christians would die. And the Jews, same thing. In other words, true God believers, right? If you're a true God believer, you better flee, go migrate someplace else, right? Open borders on the United States. And otherwise you die. You go to the circus with the lions, right? So God was going to set up a sanctuary to protect his believers in Rome, right? And the full story of all this is way too long in detail, and you can see some of my other videos on this subject. But God brought Caradoc, the king of Wales, Caradoc, and he was the Pendragon of Wales. Pendragon. Now, Arviragus was the king. And then the war came out, and Caradoc took over and was the king. He was the Pendragon of Wales while the war was on. When the war is over, then it goes back to the other king, okay? So Caradoc is out there, and he's fighting with the Romans, and they're throwing their best legions at him. This is all in the history book, okay? Their best legion, they couldn't beat him, right? He beat them in every battle, right? And after one battle, the queen of the Brigantes, which was a distant relative of Caradoc's, he said, well, come on over here and rest up. Renew your strength, and, then you get back to the war. She betrayed him, told the Romans he was there, and they came and captured him through that betrayal and took him 4 generations. His grandfather, his father, him, and his children all went to Rome, captured. Well, gosh, why did God let him be captured like that? He was doing a good job of beating up on those Romans. God had a different plan, right? God was going to make him the sanctuary in Rome to protect his believers, right? So she betrayed him. He went to Rome. Now, contrary to all Roman history, Caradoc appeared before the Roman Senate, and he gave a speech, just a short little speech, and he wound up not being killed. They did that. I said all Roman history, they did that with everybody they conquered. All the kings and the generals and stuff, they killed them, right? But he gave this little speech, and they just gave him false why can't I say house arrest? They gave him house arrest for 7 years and made him promise that when he back home after the 7 years that he wouldn't again take up arms against Rome. But there was something else that happened in that speech. His daughter, one of his daughters named Gladys, said, I'm going to stand by my father no matter what. And that's against the Roman rule. You can't stand in front of Congress or the Roman Senate if you're a woman. It's strictly a men's club, right? Okay. And she did that. And he got his house arrest and all that. Well, one history that I read when I was researching all this pointed out that Augustus, Emperor Augustus, taught the British royalty children. They sent them to Rome to be educated in a very heavy educated system. So the point is that the British families, the Wales families especially, and the Roman emperor families, they knew each other. During the war, there was even a truce between the warring factions, and they went to Rome and they did their truce negotiations and everything, and then they went back home and the war started up again. Okay? Well, Caradoc got betrayed and sent to Rome. What happened then? In Paul's time, okay, they took up residence in Rome pretty near Claudius' palace. Okay? Now, Claudius knew what was happening with Gladys, because Caractacus, that was Caradoc's new name, Caractacus. Caractacus' daughter Gladys, she was a good-looking young girl, and again, they weren't mortal enemies, at each other's throats. And Claudius said, "Gee, I really like Gladys. She's a brave heart, and she's loyal to her father and everything." He adopted her. He adopted Caradoc's daughter. The emperor said, "If you're a Christian, you die." Well, okay. But that's just the beginning of it, see? Paul's mother was married, and her husband died. Paul's father died, and she remarried. And when she married, it was a Roman senator, because she was living in Rome at the time. She lived a Roman senator, not a Roman senator, but a Roman. And out of that marriage, she had another child named Rufus. Now you can find her name, Priscilla, and Rufus in chapter 16 of Romans. Oh, Paul's people are living in Rome. That's the family that he wrote the book of Romans to. He didn't write to some unknown bunch of people who were in Rome. It was his whole family, his own family, his mother, his half-brother, right? Not only that, Paul became a cousin-in-law of Claudius the emperor. How'd that happen? Rufus, his half-brother, at that time had become a Roman senator. Hi, mucky muck. Well, Rufus married Claudia, the emperor's adopted daughter. So because Rufus, the half-brother, was Paul's family, Claudia, the adopted daughter of the emperor, became his in-law. Paul was the emperor's cousin. Pretty neat trick by God. That's what I say, But that's not where this rabbit hole bottoms out. I've got another video on this whole thing here. If you go back just a few generations, 3 or 4 generations behind Caradoc, surprise. Now, here's a chart that I put together from 2 separate charts, and you may want to pause the video to examine this a little more closely. And you can take a screenshot and print one out for yourself. Now, the genealogy on the left of Joseph down to Jesus came from the Herald's Office of the British College of Arms, and it was in a book called Did the Virgin Mary Live and Die in England? On the right side is from Joseph down to Caradoc, and it's continuing on till around 400 AD. But it also lists those who went with Joseph on the ship in 37 AD. Now, the Brittany family, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, they stayed in the south of France, preaching and establishing churches. Now, the rest went on to Glastonbury. But please notice on the left side how the Zebedee brothers and John the Baptist are close family relatives of Jesus. This whole thing is one large family affair. Really neat stuff. Caradoc's father, named Bran, he was the arch-druid, not Christian, arch-druid in Britain. Oh, he was the head druid of Britain. Because earlier than this time, he converted to Christianity. He was a Christian when Caradoc and the family was taken to Rome. Oh, okay, so his father Bran was married, okay, and out of that marriage came a woman named Penardin. Penardin. Well, Penardin came out of a marriage of great King Belai. Wait a minute. Let me get this straight here. Priscilla, right? Claudius, Cardan, Archdruid. Penardin came out of their marriage. Oh, yeah, that's right. Bran was the father of King Lear. That's the king in the middle there. King Lear from Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare, King Lear was married to Penardin, okay? Woman Penardin. Well, out of Penardin came out of a marriage between great King Belai and a woman named Anna. Anna is one of the daughters of Joseph of Arimathea. Maybe you remember who Joseph of Arimathea was, huh? He's the one that took Jesus down from the cross, right? Because he was kin. That's who was supposed to take down the people that got crucified, their family. He was kin. He took them down. Jesus was buried in his unused tomb, wasn't he? Right? Yeah. You see what that does then? You follow Jesus back up through Joseph of Arimathea, because Joseph of Arimathea was Mary's uncle. Uncle. He was great uncle to Jesus. So Jesus went up through Joseph of Arimathea and down through the kings Lear and Bran and Belai to Caradoc, and down through Caradoc to Rufus to Claudia. He was also a very decent cousin of Claudius the emperor. People of Rome were pretty safe, right? But there's another fact about Wales that's really important to this picture. Really important. Joseph of Arimathea also ran a fleet of ships. He was a cargo magnate, right? For Rome, right? He was not only a counselor in the Sanhedrin, but he was noblesse decuriae, official title of Rome, right? And he sailed his fleet of ships back and forth other places, but to Glastonbury in Wales, and he shipped tin and lead from there back into Rome. High mucky muck merchant, and he did that for a long time. In fact, during the lost, quote unquote lost, 18 years of Jesus, that's where Jesus was some of the time. He went with Uncle Joe on the ship. In one history that I read, he even stayed in England, in Glastonbury, for a whole year. Joseph went away, and then he came back later on. And one account I read was that he told the miners of the tribe of Asher, by the way, the miners, how to melt down the tin and the lead into ingots so they'd be easier to transport and stuff. Small point. The people of Glastonbury, they knew Joseph. They knew Jesus. And Joseph was highly respected there, okay? He went there after Jesus rose from the dead 3 years. In 37 A.D., Joseph of Arimathea went to Glastonbury. A lot of persecution down in Israel, okay? He took Mary, and then he took the Bethany family, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, and some disciples, and they took a ship and they went up to Glastonbury. They stopped off at Marseille in France and let off the Bethany family, and they established a bunch of churches there. Then they went on to Glastonbury and established a seminary. Joseph of Arimathea established a seminary in Glastonbury. This is because God had changed the headquarters of his church from Israel to Britain. The headquarters of God's church was there, right? The church down there in Israel went, well, nowhere, in quotes. You know, they didn't, except for the apostles and some seminary, they didn't send out missionaries like crazy, you know, not like went out from Glastonbury and then later Britain and the United States, right? They were known as the Ebionites, the poor people of God, you know, okay? So there's even, in Glastonbury, there's even an inn. There used to be an inn called the House of the Apostles, or the Inn of the Apostles, right? And lastly, research has shown that Wales was a gathering place for many Levites. Big group of Levites. Well, that happened with a lot of the different tribes. All of Asher weren't the miners in Britain. Asher was other places too. You know, different tribes, different groups of tribes went and established places. And Levites were there. Well, how natural could that be? Because that was the same as the infrastructure of God that he always used, right? Joseph was out of the tribe of Judah, right? He was a descendant of the line of David. David was a Jew, a Pharisee, a Judahite Jew. Mary, Joseph, Jesus' father, we're also out of the line of David. They're all Jews, right? And Jews, Jacob gave Jews the right to rule. They were the ones that were supposed to be the head, right? Well, Joseph was a Jew, and Joseph was the Judahite leader then of God's church, God's congregation. That's exactly the kind of thing that God always did, right? He was the head of the church, and the Levite Welsh were serving to help him in their university. Because again, he went there a lot of times with his trade back and forth. He was well known and highly respected by the Welsh people, right? Anyway, it took a while before Satan could heavily establish a church, but he did in Rome there, okay? And after many years, with the help of Constantine also, right, the diminishing church got a great infusion. Infusion of paganism, attracting pagans and filling the pews again. Okay? Because it turned out, coincidentally, that Jesus just happened to be born on the same day as Tammuz and Horus and all those other. All you people, you can come and worship here because he was born on December 25th, the same as Tammuz. Well, Constantine ended the persecution of Christianity. By the way, he was a Briton. His mother was British. His father was Roman, but his mother was British. Okay? Anyway, with the infiltration of paganism, the devil heavily established, permanently established his church. Right? And since then, that same church has lasted and ruled, quote, peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. That's a lot of people. That's everybody, right? That's what it says in Revelation 17, right? Well, chapters 17 and 18 are detailed descriptions and activities and the destiny of that church. Okay? Now we're going to go through 17 and 18 in some detail. I'm not going to read a lot of the verses to you, but this is all 17 so far. It explains the woman, the 7 heads, the 10 horns, and the waters. And you might remember from Jax174, those are the things that we talked about, but they weren't in detail. Okay? Now we're going to find out more about them. And it just confirms what it was said in 13. The names of blasphemy from verse 1 and 17 are placed on the whole beast. Okay? It doesn't say what the beast looked like. It said 7 heads, names of blasphemy. That's all it said. But now they've got crowns and all of that stuff, and it's the whole beast. Okay? The woman that's riding on the beast, that represents the pagan mystery religion. Right? She was the names of blasphemy. She wasn't in verse 13. Now she's got a detail. She's riding on the beast. The beast is transporting that message, her, throughout history. Okay? So she represents the pagan mystery, which is the blasphemy. And her name is right there in verse 5. It says, and upon her forehead was the name written, all capital letters, Mystery Babylon the Great. Mystery Babylon the Great. Babylon, the nation, isn't a mystery. We know all kinds of stuff about mystery. It's the mystery religion. It's called the mystery religions. Right? The mother of harlots. Harlots for God are people who blaspheme him. Blaspheme God. Right? And abominations on the earth, of the earth. And please note how much of the earth her system affects. Okay? I said it before. The whole earth. Right? Right? It's made very clear in verse 6 when it says that she has already killed saints and martyrs of Jesus. Okay, we got to make a distinction here. Aren't martyrs of Jesus saints? What does saint mean in Hebrew, in Greek? Hagios. It means turning it over to God. Turning everything over to God. That's what a saint does. Okay? Well, martyrs are saints. Why say saints and martyrs? Why say saints and saints? Isn't one saint enough? Because there's 2 different kinds of saints. Anybody turning it over to God is a saint, no matter when they lived. In Nimrod's time, people who went to God were saints. And since Nimrod's time until today, the pagan activist people are killing God's saints. That's why there's 2 saints listed there. Okay? Because she's been killing saints all through history. Now later on, just in a couple of verses, we're going to find out that she represents the headquarters, not just the beast itself, but the headquarters of the system. She's riding on the beast through those 7 empires, but where does she actually sit? And then it talks about the beast Apollyon. You remember Apollyon from 13? He's the king of the bottomless pit. And it says Apollyon comes out of the bottomless pit. Right? Okay? He comes out of the bottomless pit to enter into the man that's called the Antichrist. And the 7 heads listed in verse 1 are mountains, right? The 7 mountains. And verse 9 and 10 talk about the 7 kings that headed up those mountains, right? But pay attention to what happens to one of those kings. Now those are the fallen angels that are ruling the spiritual system of all the empires, right? They're the fallen angels. The 3rd one, angel, was the one that kept Gabriel from getting to Daniel when he wanted to tell him about what he saw in a vision, right? And Gabriel and Michael nailed him down into the bottomless pit and closed the door and locked it. And he was gone. Right? Remember that? Okay. That's what he's going to talk about right here. It says that in John's day, it says 5 of those kings are fallen. There's 7 heads. 5 of those are fallen. Okay? 1. Now that 5 are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. Those empires are gone. It's the Roman Empire now. So those 5 are gone, and now the king, the fallen angel, is ruling empire, the Roman Empire, in John's day. Okay? But Apollyon is going to come out of the bottomless pit sometime in the future. Okay? So verse 8 outlines this king that's going to come out of the pit. This king outlines three conditions. He was the king of the fallen angel of Medo-Persia. He was, but he is not. Right now, in John's day, he is not. Where is he? He's over in the bottomless pit. But will come out of the bottomless pit at a later time. He was, he is not, and he will come. That can only be one of those fallen angel spiritual leaders of the empires. And the only one we know of that got taken out by God with the angels is Apollyon. Okay? Apollyon is rising and going to inhabit the man that's the Antichrist. Okay? And without making any of these connections, those 7 heads are up for grabs as to who they really are. That's why so many teachers have made them into the 7 heads of Rome, right? Oh, the 7 mountains around Rome. It didn't say mountains, it said hills, right? And then the next thing it's mentioned is the 10 horns, okay? Those are the 10 kings of the 10 nations that are ruled by the Antichrist when he's given rule over them, okay? And you remember in 173 I said the sea, and I said, well, that's the totality of humanity. Well, just with that information, you could maybe put a hole in that argument. Say, well, that could be something else. That could be. It outlines it right here in verse 15, right? It says, oh, and also it verifies that it's a worldwide thing that's happening, not just one nation, right? It says it would come out of the sea peoples, remember I said this earlier, peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. That's not just one nation, that's everybody, right? People that talk different languages, you know? Verse 18 of chapter 17 can't be misinterpreted, okay? It tells what the woman is. It says she is what? The great city. The great city. You see, because the whore is not sitting on the beast anymore. Now she's sitting on the earthly city, perpetuating the Babylonian message in John's day. Okay? Or she will be soon, right? Again, world history is what we're talking about here. Because the verse goes on to say that reigneth over the kings of the earth. Reigneth over the kings of the earth. What city of history has had vast influence over whole nations? One city. And let me ask you another question. When was the United States powerful enough to influence other nations of the world. Maybe as early as the 1800s, the late 1800s, maybe. Huh? The United States did not exist when Rome ruled the known world, or Assyria or Greece. Right? Can you see how that makes it impossible for the United States to be the great city Babylon? Oh, well, that's just it. I got a whole bunch of stuff coming up for that. Okay? So let's go on. And you see, there's no chapter and verse in the Bible. When John wrote, he didn't put a chapter in there. He said, she is the great city, and here's what she's like. New paragraph. That's it, okay? So chapter 18 goes on to detail out the city. And you may notice when you look up the chapter and verse that it's mentioned by God 6 times. Now you remember what 6 number is, right? It's the number of a man, right? From the mark of the beast and all that, 666, the number of a man. Number of man, it's the number of man's religion. 6, the city, 6. Not the number of God's religion, right? It's man's church. Okay? But when we add those 6 to the last one of chapter 18, where it says the great city, we have 7 of them, and that's the number of completion. So just a small point here, God shows us who the city is and the destruction of the city, right? He completes it. Number of completion. Again, the 7 heads dictate who can't be the Antichrist, okay? It says nobody can be the Antichrist unless they came from the bear, right? The bear. Where the bear stands. Where do the bears stand? In the Medo-Persian Empire, according to Daniel, okay? Okay, that relies on, that applies to what I'm going to tell you here. One scholar, I have to call him a scholar, right? He was being interviewed on last times and prophecy and all that stuff, you know. He had already written 2 books and was awaiting a 3rd one to be published already. He wrote 3 books on the subject, right? He says that King Charles, the new king of Britain, King Charles is the Antichrist. Now, I've heard that a long time ago. Somebody said that, well, Charles' name figures out into be 666. See? I just kind of skimmed through there because what I was looking for was what he had to say about the death of the Antichrist and coming back to life. And although he didn't go into detail on that, it came up in the conversation because one of the interviewers said something about, well, the death of the Antichrist and so forth, and they talked about it a little bit, but he didn't detail out what he actually thought. But you could tell by the conversation that he included that into being the man, the Antichrist, and not one of the 7 heads empires. No wonder he was wrong about Charles. Charles didn't come from Middle East, you know? Okay? Why did God... Here's a lot of these proofs, okay? This is all against those who say that the United States is Babylon. And there's more than a couple of them. Why did God literally write the word city 6 times? City. And look it up in the original language. Some Greek words have 2 or 3 different things that they can be translated as. Say, well, it could be this or it could be that or whatever. Not with city. City in English is translated from one word, polis. And that's the only word that's listed as a translation. City. Metropolis, Greek. Right? City. Why did God use the word 6 times, let alone 1 or 2, 6 times, if he knew that the United States was going to be the head paganism influencer of the world? And fulfill all of these things that we talk about here in city, right? What's that city like? Again, more than a few people say that Babylon is the great city. And all they're doing is pushing down the throats of people who think they're believers or say they're believers, that they better get on track, because God's going to punish Babylon, punish the United States. Well, maybe some punishment's going to happen, but not because of what they say, okay? Because they say that the Bible says, Babylon, come out of her. Okay, we're going to get to a lot of that, okay? So what they do, they can promote the idea that the United States is completely destroyed by fire, as it says in a minute, by fire, okay? Because this fire is the result of a nuclear attack. And that certainly makes a lot of sense in today's world. Huh? I mean, it started off down in the Cold War, but now even the mainstream news is talking about Russia sending some of those hypersonic nuke missiles over to the United States. And let me put in here a little fact about that. Those missiles can travel at 10 and 15 times the sound, the speed of sound. Mach 10 or 15. Some of them even go faster than that. And they can also maneuver around, and we have no defense against those missiles. Okay? Now that's bad enough. But what really tells the story is that when we have our radar and our satellites and everything, and we see that missile come out of the ground over in Russia, okay? We say, uh-oh, and they start getting our missiles ready, okay? It takes them a half an hour or so to get our missiles ready, right? And by that time, all of those hypersonic missiles have traveled the number of minutes to their destinations. The war is over before we even get a chance to launch our missiles, right? Well, okay. Today's world can seem to confirm that, okay? But the Bible says, Revelation 18:8, right? It says, therefore, shall her plagues come in one day. All the bad stuff is going to come in one day. Death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly, bold type, utterly burned with fire. No, not burned a little bit. Utterly. The whole thing. That's what it means to me. The whole country burned with fire. I don't know. And those teachers also have confirmation about this, because another verse means to them a nuclear strike. See? It says in verse 10, it says, in 1 hour thy judgment is come. You go to war with Russia, and they send those hypersonic missiles over. In less than an hour, the war is over, right? Right? Nuclear strike on 5 or 6 major U.S. cities, New York, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, and so forth. That looks just like that, right? And the term 1 hour is repeated. Oh, you'll see it's repeated this time in verses 19 and 17. Well, that great city has to be the United States. No, it doesn't. All right? Let's go on with verses 11 and 15. Okay? And all the things that are listed here apply to what the Vatican has done all the way from 500, even before that, 500 A.D. Huh? A long time they've been doing this thing here. The Jesuits sent out missionaries, quote unquote, and they dominated world trade, right? And they became the exact picture that's listed in verse 16, right? Now, before 16, it says that the merchants are crying out as they watch Babylon burn by satellite. And in 16 it says, and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, robes of fine linen, and purple, banners of purple, and scarlet, college of cardinals, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. That's the very description that St. Francis gave. Gave the Pope and his outfit hell for when he went to Rome to visit, right? You guys, you're doing it. Anyway, where are you going to find a city in history that's decked out the way the Vatican is decked out, right? They're a whole country by themselves now. What city ever became a whole country, right? And certainly the United States lower and middle classes aren't decked out that way, right? There's another point in verse 17, because that brings us to the world scale again, okay? That's an important part about this, being the world scale, not just a city, right? You can't make this into a nation. 17 says, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, well, that can be every shipmaster of the United States, maybe, 200 or 300 of them, and all the company in ships, not just the masters, but the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. And the destruction is repeated in verse 19 when it says, wherein were made the rich all that had ships in the sea. All that had ships in the sea. Not just the United States ships, but all people, all nations that had ships. It's not one nation. When did the United States, another one, when did the United States kill, quote, God's holy apostles and prophets? Never? Verse 20 says that God's going to avenge their death. Yeah, he's going to see that the United States killed all those prophets and evangelists and yeah. The final destination nails down what it says. See? It says, thus with violence shall the great city Babylon, the United States, be thrown down, and shall be found no more. Found no more? Well, the whole United States will disappear to the point of not being able to be found? I mean, I can easily see how that can be one city. You drop a 100 megaton bomb on New York and it's not going to be recognizable anymore, right? Not 1/3 of a continent. The whole city? No. And after all of the blasphemy talk, and that blasphemy being directly connected with the Babylonian message, you can't make it anything else. Babylonian pagan mystery religion that can't apply to the United States because we've fallen out of grace as a country with God. You know? The USA has not promoted and perpetuated paganism for 1,800 years and longer, right? Not the way the Vatican has, huh? Satan has set up his church with one goal in mind. One goal, all the way from the Garden of Eden, right? He's going to bring us to a person who will deceive the whole world population that the man that becomes the Antichrist is really a son of God. And he's bringing his false prophet in to confirm that. He's going to rescue the world. Right. God warned us that deception is going to be so great that if it was possible, even the elect would be fooled by it. Right? Well, don't you be one of them. Yeah? Take what I've shown you and study the God out of it. I really like that. Study the God out of it. See, think about this. It's not the devil in the details. It's not? No. You uncover any rock you want to name, and on the very bottom of those details, you're going to find God. Logically, that has to be true. God created everything, right? The devil just tries to slow us up. But the details, the true thing about anything you're looking at, is God. Right? That great city is the Vatican. It can't be anything else. Look at all that evidence out there, right? It's not the USA, the city, any kind of a nation. Okay, one last look. Verses 23 and 24. There's not going to be anybody there. Nobody there, right? 23. And the light of a candle shall no more be seen in thee. Not even a shine of a candle. And the voice of the bridegroom. Who's the bridegroom? Jesus. And the bride shall no more be heard in thee. No true believer will be found talking about God and Jesus wherever this was, wherever this city used to be, right? The whole nation, no, right? By thy sorceries were all nations deceived. By the sorcery of the United States, no. The sorcery of the Vatican, right? 24. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all that were slain upon the earth. All. Well, how can all that's slain upon the earth apply to the United States? It applies to all history, throughout which the pagan system has warred against God's believers. Those two churches. How many believers did just Rome send to the lions, right? Those two churches are still at it today. Why? Well, that's because the world is in such a dire strait. Those two churches, God's church has been divided up by the devil as best he can, and his church has divided up the world as best as he can with the UN and World Economic Forum and all that stuff. It's no wonder the world is in such a dire strait, right? There's only one way to understand Revelation, prophecy, and even Daniel, to form a complete and accurate picture that does everything it says it's going to do, right? And that way is to know what the seven heads are. Once you know what they are, everything else lines up, comes to life. I hope that helped you understand, give you some relief about what's going on in the world and who's in charge and who isn't in charge. And maybe you can get straight with God in the meantime, right? Okay? Thanks a lot for watching. God bless.